We welcome Dr. Panagariya. So, pleasure having you
Hi,
with
Latha.
us. Well, so let me start with
For me too.
Okay. Let me start straight away with the economic survey. There is a great reiteration of fiscal discipline in the medium term of 3%, but I didn't anywhere explicitly see the commitment to 3.6% as a first step. What's your own sense that we can take some liberties initially?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, Latha. Within 24 hours, we will know what liberties we take or we don't take. It will be premature for me to speculate on where the deficit is going to land.
I'm not asking you to outguess, sir, but I'm just asking as a view, will it be okay to renege by a few basis points in the first year?
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, this is an issue, that can the transition be different? And the difference, I certainly don't think that the finance minister ought to actually take so much liberty that he from 4.1 he goes to 4.4 or 4.5 there. The road should be towards 3, so it should. So the next one should be 4.1 or less. But can we take some liberty? Yes. I think 3.6 was decided upon under one set of circumstances, and if the finance minister feels that today the circumstances are not quite what they were at the time the 3.6 target was chosen, by all means, yes.
Well, Dr. Panagariya,
that's my personal view.
No, I take your point, sir. In fact, we are not even trying to tie in the economic survey as giving us a read of the budget. In the past, the connect has not always been one-to-one. So I'm not holding you to outguessing the budget for me at all. I just wanted your view. How would the international community view this if we were to renege? We had forecast the 4.1 and the 3.6 at very different crude prices of $100 and $115. Now we have a manna from heaven which is reducing our subsidies from 2.1% of the GDP to probably 1.4% of the GDP. Under such circumstances, to renege on fiscal discipline, will not the rating agencies look askance?
Latha, I've always maintained, and I've talked to a lot of the ratings agencies. I'm not as many as you probably, or as frequently as you probably do, but they all say that they never do the ratings based on a single issue, meaning the fiscal deficit. They see the budget as a package. That's number one. Number two, there are certainly these favorable points that you have made, favorable developments that have happened. But on the other hand, don't forget that there is another side to the context, which is that the 14th Finance Commission has recommended a 42% devolution of the divisible pool to the states. So that automatically it does limit the fiscal space for the central government. So it is in that context, there's a 10 percentage point jump compared to what it was. The government is not complaining, and I was very pleased. The Prime Minister has stuck to his fiscal federal cooperative federalism theme, and he is himself very pleased with that. That being said, for the Finance Minister, that makes a tougher act actually, because the fiscal space is that much reduced.
Well, Dr. Panagariya, lesser mortals like journalists can make this comparison of 32 and 42%. You know those numbers too well, sir. The original number was never really 32%. That was the mandatory transfer. The centre was anyway transferring something like 39.5% at least. The difference really is 3 or 4 percentage points. Is that argument enough? How much money really is coming less?
No. So you are comparing 32 and 42, and then there is other grants, which will in this case also go on top, which is for the revenue deficit grants, the local body grants, disaster management grants. These are all going to be on top of the 42%. The way the Finance Commission saw it was that the central government ought to trim down, as desired also by the states, the centrally sponsored schemes and other central schemes. That was the point. But you know, as you know and I know, social expenditure schemes, particularly relating to the poor, are not that easy to cut. So there is an act that the finance minister will need to perform. I mean, what does he do with the central schemes? What does he do with centrally sponsored schemes? Remember that some of these, in fact, are legislated. You've got NREGA, which has to be done. That's why legislation. PDS, that's not a centrally sponsored scheme, but nevertheless, that is a program to which the government is committed by legislation. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, there is a commitment. You see, so some of these cannot be cut. So the 42% actually has real implications.
Yes, it has, but Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is not legislated. Likewise, the NRHM is not.
No, under RTE.
And they can always be devolved.
Under right to education.
Okay.
Under right to education. No, you can't devolve. I mean, if you think any state will say that, well, you know, that I'm a very nice guy, I'm just going to take over the expenditure of NREGA. They are going to say that, look, you know, this is your central scheme, so it's your obligation, not mine. So it remains the centre's, and anyway the centre is not going to actually act so irresponsible as to just let go of NREGA and count on the goodness of the states to undertake it.
Well,
the centre cannot really.
Well, I would still have a couple of arguments that, you know, the Finance Commission is constraining the centre from meeting fiscal targets. The very same Finance Commission has ordained 3.6 and 3%.
Yeah, but that was under a very different set of assumptions on the tax revenues. The tax revenues have ended up being far lower than what the Finance Commission assumed in those reports.
Okay. So what about?
So you're back to that same issue.
Okay. What about the extent to which the survey extols this 8.1% and 8.5% growth? If growth is indeed 8.1 to 8.5%, is there any argument for a fiscal stimulus?
Any fiscal stimulus in what sense? I mean,
in terms of,
in terms of
saying that, that we should not be pro-cyclical, and that there is you cannot adhere to fiscal discipline because of growth reasons and macro reasons, but the macro growth, the same survey says, is 8.1%.
No. Where are you saying?
If growth is 8.1,
latest figure I have seen is 7.4.
For the current year. For the current year, sir. For the current year, it's 7.4. But the forecast for FY16 is 8.1 to 8.5%. So if the forecast for next year...
that forecast is probably contingent on something. I mean, you can't do the forecast just based on nothing. So maybe the forecast actually does assume some small bit of fiscal stimulus.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you have to read the survey carefully, and I've had as much time to read it as you did.
Okay.
But you can't take the forecast and ask me the question about fiscal stimulus on that basis.
No, actually, even at 7.4%, it will be a little difficult to argue that fiscal stimulus is needed, isn't it?
No. Look, I mean, all we are talking about, all I have said is that, you know, you pose the question, can you deviate from 3.6? And my argument was that, you know, as long as you don't deviate too much. I mean, the journey, so your room is between 4.1 and 3.6. Take your pick.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying.
Okay.
And you know, there's still an issue of infrastructure building. I mean, that need is well identified, that the infrastructure needs to be built up.
Yeah.
And for that, if you do actually go in and choose a target different from 3.6 but below 4.1, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, the argument against fiscal stimulus of a large degree also comes from the international experience after the global financial crisis. A lot of the emerging markets tried to do fiscal stimulus and regretted it. And we know the sad case in China where stimulus went to as much as 12% of GDP. And even in India, we are living to regret the kind of profligacy that we indulged in post-2008. Historically and across continents, the argument is not very clear that fiscal stimulus has worked.
But Latha, we are not talking large numbers here. The fiscal stimulus that the Americans tried was a very large one. The Europeans are trying a very large one. Here we are talking of cutting deficit from 4.1 to either 3.6 or something between 4.1 and 3.6. It's not a large issue. So bringing in these large fiscal stimuluses that we also used after 2008 crisis, that's a complete straw man here. That has nothing to do with what we are talking about in terms of the fiscal deficit for the next year.
Okay. All right. What's your sense in terms of, interest rates coming down and that, giving growth a kicker? What, in your own estimate, is the likely growth for next year? And how much do you think monetary stimulus how much stimulus the Monetary Authority can give?
No, again, I mean, I'll not commit to any numbers. If the question is that should the Monetary Authority let the interest rate go down? Yes. In the next round, should it let it go down more than a quarter percentage point? You bet. How far? That I'll leave for the Reserve Bank of India governor to decide.
Okay. But you would buy in that 8% forecast, 8.1 to 8.5% forecast for next year?
Well, I'm an optimist always, so if we are 7.4 already, yes, I think we ought to go to 8 at least, 8, 8.5. So I certainly, given the fact that, as measured by the CSO now, 7.4 was already there for the year 14-15, and even 13-14 was not bad, 6.9. So yeah, I mean, we are on a rising trajectory, and we ought to get there between 8 and 9.
Okay. So what's your estimate in terms of our ability to control expenditure through this jam trinity that the survey talks about, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile? Any details that you can add in terms of the ability to control seepages and how much we may be able to save?
Yeah, no, I don't know the numbers. I think the survey does give some numbers, and I really can't carry them in my head. Okay. But for sure, remember that we have all of us have complained about the massive leakages that happen, and these are large programs. Think of the food distribution, PDS, very large leakages, Narega, large leakages. So I think scope is very significant and substantial scope is there. But I can't tell you.
Okay. So, but if a public boost, a public investment boost has to come, at what sectors should it be directed? What form should it take?
Well, one sector that is an obvious one that stares us in the eyes is the broad sector, meaning is infrastructure, and that includes obviously the roads, railways. I think railway. We already have seen the railway budget. And we certainly need a boost in investment in railways. Then you got power sector. Clearly, that is another very important one. A very important sector where you need to invest. So basically infrastructure sectors, all of them.
Okay. Well, the survey says that the amount of stuck projects in India, and many of them are in infrastructure, amount to 7% of the GDP. However, the silver lining is that it was as bad as 8.3% of the GDP a year ago. And in the latest quarter, the tally has at least fallen to 7%, which means we are plateauing in terms of number of projects that are getting stuck. What is your sense? How does the government alleviate it? It is not clearly the progress is very slow.
Yes, but here again, I mean, this is crystal balling. I mean, so we are just hypothesizing here. But I would expect this pace to pick up a bit because when things were so badly jammed, the unjamming began, and then sure enough, the unjamming was slower initially. But as you're unjamming at different points, pressure points. I think it ought to actually snowball a bit. So my own kind of, again, maybe you can attribute it to my general optimism, but my own guess would be that we'll see some acceleration there. the message is going through, and maybe it still has not percolated all the way down to the last pressure point. But as it is happening, I'm kind of optimistic, cautiously optimistic that this process will accelerate.
Okay. Well, let me end where I began, sir, on the issue of fiscal discipline. Our profligacy after 2008, the fiscal profligacy, is widely seen by many economists as one reason why we harvested this double-digit inflation for a fairly long period of time. We have very painfully brought both fiscal deficit and inflation down. Would it not be therefore very important for inflation to be kept reined in, that fiscal targets are also met?
So, as I said, we are talking between I'm talking between 3.6 to 4.1. Now, the bigger issue to me is what else we see, what other actions get taken in the budget, and then how exactly the central bank reacts to what the finance minister does tomorrow. I think, so it's not a matter of the single number of fiscal deficit. It's a matter of a whole lot of things that would have a play in this game of inflation. Also, the international prices, how do they come in? Are the oil prices begin to rise again? Are the commodity prices, wheat and rice, etc., going to begin rising again in the world market, etc.? So all those factors are going to matter.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Panagariya, for sparing us time today, and we hope we can touch base with you tomorrow after the budget numbers are known.
Pleasure to be with you, Latha.
Thank you, sir.